My name is Ethan Levy. I was born into an Orthodox Jewish family in Brooklyn, New York. From the time I could walk, I was raised in the rhythm of tradition. Morning prayers with my father, Hebrew school in the afternoons, and Shabbat dinners that stretched into the night with discussions about Torah and Talmud around the table. Faith wasn't just something we believed. It was who we were. It shaped every moment, every decision, every breath. By my early 20s, I knew I wanted to become a rabbi. Not for prestige, not for power, but because the Torah had captured my soul. It was more than scripture to me, it was divine architecture. Every letter, every pause, every law was infused with purpose. I believed the Torah was God's direct revelation to the Jewish people, and I had made it my mission to understand it as deeply as possible, and to teach it to others with accuracy and reverence. I spent years in yeshiva studying day and night, memorizing not only the Torah but the Mishnah, the Talmud, and the writings of our sages. My teachers were men of great discipline and insight, and I did everything I could to follow in their footsteps. Eventually, I was ordained and took a position as a congregational rabbi. My days were filled with study, teaching, pastoral care, and leading our community in prayer and practice. I loved my people, I loved our traditions. I loved the responsibility that came with guiding others in the ways of our ancestors. I never took it lightly. I believed in the covenant, the one given to Abraham, reaffirmed through Moses. That covenant defined who we were, a chosen people bound by law, tradition, and identity. My life followed a steady rhythm, a sacred pattern etched into time by generations before me. I would wake before sunrise, wrap tefillin around my arm and forehead, and whisper the morning prayers with kavana, with intention. Each word of the Shema, each blessing from the Amidah was spoken not from routine, but from genuine devotion. After prayer, I'd join a small group of men at our synagogue for Torah study before breakfast. We'd argue in love, debating interpretations, wrestling with commentaries from Rashi, Rambam, and the sages of old. These sessions were the lifeblood of my mind. They sharpened my thinking and deepened my awe for God's wisdom. Most of my mornings were spent preparing lessons. I taught in our synagogue's Beit Midrash, guiding young men through complex passages in the Talmud, always emphasizing intentionality in their learning. I pushed them not just to recite, but to understand, to challenge, to absorb the heartbeat of the law. Afternoons were for counseling. Congregants would come in with questions, sometimes practical, sometimes existential. I'd help a young couple navigate the rules of Taharat Hamishpacha, family purity. Sit with a grieving widow reciting Tehillim, or mediate disputes with care and fairness. These moments grounded me. I wasn't just a scholar, I was a shepherd. At home, life was warm but modest. My wife Miriam was my anchor, steadfast, wise, and deeply spiritual. She lit Shabbat candles with tears in her eyes every Friday evening. We raised 3 children together in observance and love. They went to Jewish schools, learned Hebrew from an early age, and never once ate outside our kosher kitchen. Friday afternoons were always special. The whole house transformed, clean, quiet, filled with the smells of challah and roasted chicken. We'd gather at the table, bless the wine and bread, and sing Zemirot before diving into lively Torah discussions. It wasn't just tradition. It was life, it was joy. To me, God's presence was not distant. It was embedded in every detail. The law was not a burden. It was a gift. Every commandment, every halakhic detail was a way to draw nearer to the divine. My worldview was deeply covenantal. We were a people with a mission, chosen not because we were better, but because God entrusted us with His word. As for Christianity, it was never something I hated or mocked. In fact, I had Christian friends growing up, and I admired their commitment to family and prayer. But I viewed their faith as misaligned. Sincere, perhaps, but built on theological errors. Jesus, to me, was a Jewish teacher who became the center of a religion that veered off course. The Messiah was supposed to bring lasting peace, rebuild the temple, restore the exiles, not die on a Roman cross. That didn't make sense to me. When Christians would try to speak to me about Jesus, I would listen politely, but always decline further conversation. Sometimes I'd offer a respectful counterpoint from the Torah just to clarify our position. But never with anger or contempt. I wasn't anti-Christian. I simply believed they were wrong. I saw Jesus as a historical figure, not the Messiah, not divine. I believed in one God, indivisible and eternal, and in a faith built on mitzvot, the commandments, not on grace or atonement through a man. I felt confident in that belief. Grounded, my certainty wasn't arrogance. It came from decades of study, prayer, and spiritual wrestling. I had built a life on truth, or so I thought. My heart was at peace in my convictions. I wasn't looking for anything more. I didn't feel lacking. I believed I was walking in truth. Until the day everything changed. It was a Thursday afternoon in early spring. I had just finished counseling a young couple preparing for marriage. We discussed ketubah language and family expectations, the small but sacred details of a life built on covenant. I was heading home to prepare my Shabbat sermon, one I'd been particularly excited about, focusing on Parashat Vayikra and the meaning of sacrifice. As I walked through the synagogue lobby, I felt a sudden tightness in my chest. At first, I thought it was indigestion or maybe a pulled muscle. I brushed it off. There was always stress before Shabbat. So much to prepare. So many people to care for. But the tightness didn't go away. It spread slowly, then quickly up into my shoulders and down my left arm. My breathing turned shallow. I stopped trying to steady myself on the wall, but my vision blurred slightly. Still, I told myself it was nothing. I couldn't be having a heart attack. I was only 52. I ate well, I walked every day. I had no family history. Miriam had been waiting for me at home. When I walked in the door, I tried to smile, to put on the mask of composure I wore so well. She immediately noticed something was wrong. "You're pale," she said, walking over. "What's wrong?" "Just a little pressure, it'll pass," I muttered, waving her off. She didn't buy it. "Sit, I'm calling the doctor." No, just give me a moment." I tried to stand up straighter, to reassert my control. But the pain surged like a wave crashing through my chest. My knees buckled. I collapsed into the dining room chair, clutching my chest. Miriam's face changed from concerned to pure panic. She grabbed her phone and called emergency services. Her voice trembled, but she stayed composed as she gave our address. The next few minutes were chaos. My breathing turned labored, a shallow, desperate panting. Sweat poured down my face. I felt like my entire body was folding in on itself. A crumpling of the flesh that housed my soul. The pain wasn't sharp like a knife. It was crushing like an iron weight pressing me down, pinning me to the chair. I wanted to pray, to speak a final, desperate prayer to the God I had served my entire life. But I couldn't form the words. I wanted to tell Miriam I was sorry, that I loved her. But even that was beyond me. My tongue felt like a stone. Paramedics burst into the house and began working quickly. I could hear them talking, but it felt like they were far away. Their voices muffled, their faces distorted. One of them asked if I could hear him. I tried to nod to give them a sign, but my body wouldn't respond. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, I caught one last glimpse of Miriam. She stood frozen near the doorway, her hand over her mouth. Tears streaming down her cheeks, her face a mask of profound grief. And then everything faded. The pain, the noise, the light, just silence, and then nothing. The next thing I remember was weightlessness. No pain, no sound, no panic, just stillness. At first, I thought I had blacked out. But then I noticed something strange. I was aware, not just vaguely conscious, but fully aware, more than I'd ever been before. My senses were sharp, heightened. Yet I couldn't feel my body. I wasn't lying down, I wasn't standing, I wasn't anywhere. And then I saw it. Below me, yes, below, was a scene I should never have been able to witness. 2 paramedics were hovering over a man on a stretcher in my dining room. One was pressing rhythmically on his chest, the other shouting numbers and instructions. Preparing defibrillator pads. It took only a moment to realize the man on the stretcher was me. My first reaction wasn't fear. It was confusion, deep, disorienting confusion. How was I seeing myself from above? I saw Miriam crouched in the hallway, praying with her face buried in her hands. I wanted to scream her name, to tell her I was okay, or at least here. But when I tried, nothing came out. No voice, no sound. I didn't even feel breath. I tried to move closer, to reach out, but there was no arm to extend. My presence just hovered like a thought that couldn't land. The scene felt both immediate and far away. I was watching it unfold, but it no longer felt like mine. I saw my own body, pale, limp, lifeless. And I felt a strange mix of detachment and grief. It wasn't horror. It was sorrow. Not for myself, but for the people still caught in that moment. Miriam, the paramedics, my children who didn't yet know what was happening. I began to grasp what was happening. I was outside of my body, not metaphorically, literally. I don't know how long I remained there. Time seemed irrelevant, like I was existing outside of it. A strange calm began to settle over me. Not comfort, just quiet. I wasn't panicking anymore. I wasn't trying to fight it. I just watched, detached. And in that stillness, something began to change. The room around me grew dimmer. Not darker, just less real. The urgency of the scene faded into the background like a TV slowly being muted. I felt myself pulling away, not dragged, but gently drawn. And I knew somehow deep inside that I was crossing a threshold. Whatever came next, I was no longer tethered to the world I had known. As I drifted further from the scene below, the edges of my awareness began to dissolve. The walls of my home, the flashing lights of the ambulance, the frantic movements of the paramedics. All of it faded like mist under the sun. What replaced it wasn't darkness. It was something else entirely. Light, but not light like we know it. This light wasn't from a lamp or the sun. It didn't shine on things. It was the space. It didn't cast shadows. It didn't have a source. It surrounded me, filled me, invited me. It was alive. That's the only way I can describe it. The light had presence. It wasn't just brightness. It was intelligence, warm, aware, welcoming. It pulsed gently like it breathed. And with every pulse, I felt something deeper settle into me. Peace, clarity, and love in its purest form. The warmth of it was overwhelming. Not like heat, but like being known and still embraced. It reached into every part of me. Even the places I didn't know were there. My fear began to melt away. The sorrow I felt floating above my body was still there. But now it was wrapped in comfort, like a parent holding a crying child. There was no sound in the traditional sense, but the space itself spoke, not in words, but in knowing. I felt it like a quiet message etched into the air around me. Come closer. Come closer. That simple invitation stirred something in me, a pull not forceful but irresistible. I hesitated not from fear exactly, but from uncertainty. I had spent my entire life studying what comes after death. I had memorized the Mishnah and the Talmud, the commentaries of our greatest sages. And yet I never imagined this. This wasn't Gan Eden the way I had envisioned it. This wasn't the soul's rest or a heavenly courtroom. It was more. I had never doubted the existence of God, but I had always pictured him as beyond reach, wrapped in mystery and holiness so great we could never draw too near. This light, this presence was holy, yes, but not distant. It was near, intimate. It knew me, and that terrified me. Not because it was harsh, but because it was real. I could feel it examining me, not with judgment, but with total clarity. It knew who I was, not just what I had done, but who I had become over the years. And yet I felt no condemnation, only invitation. Still a small voice inside me, the one trained by years of Torah study. By careful lines and halakhic texts, by lectures and books and boundaries. Whispered that this didn't fit. That something was off, that I had no framework for what I was seeing. But another voice, deeper and more honest, spoke too. This is truth, this is what you've been longing for. I couldn't deny that the light didn't contradict the God I had worshipped. It felt like his fullness, as though the veils I had always looked through were being gently pulled back. And within that light, I sensed another presence. Not separate, but distinct. Someone. I didn't see a face yet, but I knew someone was there, watching, waiting. Not with impatience, but with the calm of someone who had always known this moment would come. The feeling grew stronger as I moved closer to the light. I felt like I was being drawn towards something, not just a place, but a person. Someone who had always known me, even before I knew myself. And I realized in that moment that I wasn't just being welcomed, I was being called. As I moved deeper into the light, the presence I had sensed began to take form. At first, it was just an impression, like a silhouette behind a curtain of radiance. But slowly the figure stepped forward, not as if approaching from a distance, but as if the veil itself was lifting. He stood in front of me, majestic, but not imposing, radiant, yet not blinding. There was a purity in him that no words can hold. A light that didn't shine on him, but seemed to shine from him. His robe flowed like soft wind, glowing with a soft white fire. His face, I struggle even now to describe it. There was no flaw, no harshness. His features were strong yet gentle, timeless yet human. But it was his eyes that undid me. They were the eyes of someone who had known me forever. They looked right through me, past everything I'd built up. Past my learning, my confidence, my questions, and reached something deeper. Not in violation, but with a kind of kindness that breaks you open. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I knew who he was even though I didn't want to. I had studied about him from a distance, dismissed him, refuted the claims of those who followed him. But now, standing in front of me, I couldn't deny him. There was no room for debate, no need for theological arguments. The truth of his identity wasn't told to me. It was felt undeniably, entirely. This was Jesus. The name thundered inside me without a sound. I recoiled slightly, not out of anger, but because everything in me started to break. No, it can't be. My knees gave way. I collapsed not from force, but from the weight of what I now understood. I had spent my life searching for truth. I thought I had found it in the Torah, and to some extent I had. But standing before him, I knew I had only ever seen a portion, a shadow of something greater. He stepped closer. He didn't look down on me. He knelt. Ethan, he said in my name, spoken in a tone I had never heard before. Carried not just love, but a profound authority. It was as if he wasn't just calling me, but something in me. You have sought God your entire life, he said. You have loved him, served him, taught his word with devotion. Tears spilled down my face. I wanted to speak, to explain, to defend what I believed. But no words came. You have been faithful, he said, but you have not understood the fullness of his plan. The words pierced me not with pain, but with truth. I felt exposed, I felt loved. All my learning, all my certainty, all my confidence, none of it prepared me for this. He wasn't here to shame me. He was here to reveal. You know the scriptures, he continued. You have walked the path of obedience. But the Torah was never the destination. It was the signpost. His voice carried both sorrow and hope. You honored the covenant, he said, but the covenant pointed to me. My heart broke, not because I felt betrayed, but because I realized I had missed him. All those years, all those verses, all the prayers. And yet he didn't reject me. He welcomed me. He saw everything I was, everything I wasn't, and still drew me in. I wept not because I was condemned, but because I was being offered something greater than I had ever known. Truth, wholeness, fulfillment. And still a small part of me resisted. Why, I asked him in my heart, why now, why me? He looked at me, his eyes burning with compassion. Because I love you, he said, and because you are ready to see. As I knelt before him, still trembling from the weight of his presence, the light around us shifted. It didn't fade, it deepened, grew richer. I felt something change, not outside of me, but within. Jesus reached out, not physically, but with something greater. And suddenly, I wasn't just standing in that light. I was inside something, a vision. I was being shown something few ever see, heaven. The moment I entered, I knew I wasn't in a place as we understand it. It wasn't geography. It was presence. Everything was saturated with love. Not the love we talk about on earth, not affection or emotion, but something purer, more consuming. It wasn't just around me, it was me. It was in every thought, every movement, every breath. The peace was unlike anything I had ever known. Not silence, but a stillness that sang. A kind of music that didn't come from instruments, but from existence itself. A harmony woven into the very structure of reality. I looked around and saw people, not bodies as we know them, but beings of light and joy. They moved effortlessly, not constrained by time or gravity. There was no sadness in their eyes, no regret on their faces. They radiated a calm joy, like they were finally home and they were known. That's what struck me most. Each one was fully known and fully loved. There was no pretense, no fear, no shame. They were whole. I saw relationships, people reunited, laughing, embracing without words. I felt their unity, not uniformity, but a oneness of purpose, of spirit. There was no competition, no ego, no need to prove anything. They were in perfect connection with each other and with the source of all things. And I felt him. God wasn't hidden here, he was here. His presence was everywhere, like a warm wind you couldn't see, but felt in every fiber of your being. I turned to Jesus. His face was illuminated in a way that made even this radiant realm seem brighter. This, he said, is not a prize. It is the fulfillment of love, a relationship brought to completion. He looked out across the expanse where the people rejoiced in quiet harmony. They are here not because they followed rules, he said, but because they knew me. Because they received what was freely given. I stood silent, overwhelmed. My entire life had been centered on obedience, on discipline, on striving. And here I was, seeing a joy I had never imagined. Not earned by effort, but born out of relationship. They didn't earn this, I asked. No, Jesus said gently, they received it. He was showing me its destination. The law was always pointing here, not as a ladder to climb, but as a signpost to follow. I didn't want to leave. A part of me already ached with the thought. Just as the light and joy of heaven settled into my soul, everything shifted. The warmth faded not suddenly, but slowly, like a fire burning down to embers. The music ceased. The harmony vanished. And then came the cold. It wasn't physical cold. It was absence. The absence of peace, of presence, of love. The air, or whatever this place was made of, felt heavy, thick with sorrow. I was no longer standing in radiance. I was in darkness. Not blackness, but a kind of suffocating shadow that seemed to press in from all sides. It wasn't simply the absence of light. It was the rejection of it. I could barely see at first, but as my eyes adjusted, I began to make out figures. They moved slowly, if at all. Some were curled in on themselves. Others wandered in circles, grasping at things that weren't there. Their forms looked human but dimmed, faded, like the outlines of who they once were and their faces. What I saw in them was not torment from some external force. It was inward grief, regret, a sorrow so deep it couldn't be expressed in words. These souls weren't being punished by fire or chained in anguish. They were suffering from a separation they knew could have been avoided. They were longing for the light, for the presence I had just left. And somehow they knew they had rejected it. Not because they were unaware, but because they had chosen something else. Jesus was beside me again. I could feel his presence, though it now felt distant, like a gentle whisper in a thunderstorm. "This is the reality of separation," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Not punishment, Ethan, consequence." I didn't speak. I couldn't. "They were loved," he continued, "each one just like you. But love cannot force, it invites, and love rejected becomes separation." I wanted to look away. I wanted to unsee what I was witnessing, but I couldn't. A woman stood near the edge of a great void, her eyes locked on something far beyond it, maybe the light I had seen. Tears streamed silently down her face. She reached forward again and again, as if trying to touch what she once knew. Others walked aimlessly, as if repeating the same choices over and over. Still others sat motionless, numb, lost. I felt a cry rise up inside me, not out of fear for myself, but for them. "How long?" I asked Jesus. "How long are they here?" He didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, "Truth must be chosen. They would not receive it there, and they will not receive it here." The pain wasn't in flames or chains. It was in knowing what they had missed and still choosing to remain apart. After the darkness, the light returned, not suddenly, but like a dawn breaking over deep night. The warmth of his presence filled me again, and I wept, not from fear this time, but from the ache of what I had seen. Jesus stood beside me, silent at first, allowing the weight of it all to settle. Then, without a word, we were moving, not walking, but passing through something unseen, until we stood before what looked like an open scroll. But this scroll wasn't made of parchment. It was alive. Words lifted from its surface, glowing and shifting as if etched in eternal fire. "The covenant," he said. "You have loved it, guarded it, lived by it." I nodded, still trembling. "And you were right to honor it," he continued, "because it is holy. But you were never meant to carry it alone." The scroll opened wider. I saw the Torah again, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, then the prophets, the Psalms, the writings. And as I looked, something happened. Passages began to connect like threads being pulled tight. Genesis 22, Abraham and Isaac, a father willing to sacrifice his only son. Exodus 12, the blood of the lamb over the doorposts. Numbers 21, the bronze serpent lifted up in the wilderness. Psalm 22, they pierced my hands and my feet. Isaiah 53. He was crushed for our iniquities. Zechariah 12, they will look on me, the one they have pierced. Each verse, each event, each prophecy lit up with new meaning. These weren't random texts. They were pieces of a divine puzzle. One I had studied all my life without seeing the full image. I did not come to abolish the law or the prophets, Jesus said, his voice steady and clear, but to fulfill them. The words pierced me not in condemnation, but like a sword cutting away blindness. I had always taught that the covenant with Israel was eternal, and I still believed that. But now I saw what I had never understood. The covenant was not complete in itself. It was a beginning, a foundation, a path that pointed beyond itself, to Him. My heart broke, not because I felt betrayed, but because I realized I had missed Him. All those years, all those verses, all the prayers. And yet He didn't reject me, He welcomed me. He saw everything I was, everything I wasn't, and still drew me in. I wept not because I was condemned, but because I was being offered something greater than I had ever known. I stood before Him, undone by everything I had seen. Heaven and hell, light and darkness, the scriptures coming alive in ways I'd never imagined. My heart was raw but open. For the first time in my life, I wasn't clinging to my knowledge, I was simply listening. Jesus looked at me, and though no lightning flashed, no thunder roared, I knew something monumental was about to be spoken. "You have been faithful," he said, his voice both strong and tender. "You have loved God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. You have taught his word with sincerity and devotion." I felt the weight of those words. He wasn't erasing my past. He was honoring it. "But now," he continued, "you are being called to more." I didn't speak, I couldn't. "You are to be a bridge," he said, "between what was and what is. Between the covenant you have lived and the fulfillment you have now seen." He paused, letting the weight settle. "There are others like you," he said. "Others who love God deeply, but do not yet see the fullness of his plan. You are to go to them not to condemn, but to reveal, to show them what you now know." The enormity of it sank in. Me, a rabbi who once dismissed him entirely, now tasked with bearing witness to the truth I had once rejected. "But why me?" I whispered. His eyes met mine. "Because your heart is sincere. Because you search for God not with pride but with love. And because those who trust you will listen when you speak." I fell to my knees. "I am not worthy," I said. "No one is," he replied, "but all are loved, and now you are sent." His words didn't erase my fear, but they gave me strength. I understood now that this wasn't a calling born out of guilt. It was one born out of love. Love for God, love for his people, love for the truth that had always been waiting. And I said yes. The moment I agreed, truly, deeply, the atmosphere shifted. The peace of the light remained, but there was movement now. A pull not away from him, but backward, back toward the world I had left behind. "It is time," Jesus said. "What you've seen is not just for you, it must be shared." I didn't want to go. Every part of me longed to stay in that perfect presence. But I knew he was right. With one last look, he placed something in me. Not physically, but spiritually, a clarity, a knowing, a fire that I knew would not burn out. Then came the rush. I felt myself falling not downward, but inward, like being pulled through layers of existence. The light faded, the warmth dimmed. The stillness was replaced by noise. Suddenly pain, sharp, crippling. My chest felt like it was being crushed. I gasped, choking on air. My body convulsed. A blinding light above me, fluorescent, not holy. I heard machines beeping, voices shouting, "He's back. Stay with us, Rabbi, stay with us." Hands pressed on me, needles in my arms, cold pads on my skin. I was back. Back in the hospital, back in the shell I had once left behind. The pain was overwhelming, not just physical, but emotional. The contrast between where I had been and where I was now made it unbearable. And yet I breathed. Each breath was ragged, shallow, but it was breath. I turned my head slightly. Miriam stood by my side, her hand gripping mine, her eyes swollen with tears. She whispered my name like a prayer. I wanted to speak, to tell her everything. But my throat was dry, my body too weak. All I could do was look at her. And in that look, I hoped she saw it, that I was alive and that everything had changed. The days that followed were quiet on the outside, but inside me a storm raged. I lay in that hospital bed, surrounded by machines and the hum of life continuing, while my soul tried to make sense of what I had experienced. I knew what I had seen. I knew who I had met, there was no denying it. And yet I couldn't bring myself to speak. Not yet. Fear gripped me. Not fear of death, I had already crossed that line. But fear of what would come if I told the truth. What would my wife think, my children, my students, my congregation? Would they call me mad, a traitor, a heretic? Every fiber of my identity had been built on my role as a rabbi, a teacher of Torah, a leader in our community. And now I had encountered the very one I had spent my life dismissing. What was I supposed to do with that? The guilt came in waves. Guilt for not having seen the truth sooner, and guilt for staying silent now. But the fear was louder. If I spoke, I might lose everything. On the third night, I couldn't sleep. My body still ached, but my heart ached more. I sat up slowly, painfully, and reached for the small wooden drawer beside my hospital bed. Inside was a book I had never opened. Not really. It was the New Testament. It had been given to me years ago by a well-meaning Christian acquaintance. Out of politeness, I had kept it. Out of pride, I had never touched it until now. My hands trembled as I opened the first page. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. I kept reading slowly, carefully, and there he was. Not just the Jesus I had met in the light, but the Jesus I had read about in the prophets, now walking the earth, speaking, healing, teaching. I came to the Sermon on the Mount and read his words. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. This hit me like a wave. This wasn't a different religion. This was the continuation, the fulfillment of everything I had taught. The shadows were becoming substance, and I knew I couldn't stay silent much longer. When I returned home, everything looked the same. Our dining table, the shelves of Torah commentaries, the mezuzah on the door. But I wasn't the same. I moved through the house like a stranger in familiar skin. I knew what I had to do, but dread sat in my chest like a stone. It started with my family. We gathered in the living room one evening. Miriam, seated across from me, held a cup of tea she barely touched. My 3 children, now grown, sat quietly, worried, respectful, but expectant. They had been patient with me since I came home from the hospital, but they could sense something was coming. I need to tell you what happened, I said. And then I told them everything. The light, the presence, the encounter with Jesus, the visions from the Torah, heaven, hell. The words he spoke to me. As I spoke, I watched their faces shift. Confusion, disbelief, then something deeper. My middle son, always the most vocal, leaned forward. You're saying you believe in Jesus? I paused, then nodded. Yes, I met him. I didn't just hear about him. I saw him and I finally understood. He is the fulfillment of everything we've believed. Miriam's eyes welled with tears. She didn't speak. She just looked at me like she was trying to recognize the man she had known for decades. My daughter broke the silence. But what about the Torah? What about everything you taught us? It's still true, I said. But now I see the full picture. He didn't erase it, he completed it. It wasn't easy. There were tears, questions, long silences, but they stayed. They listened, and somehow they didn't walk away. The harder part came next. The harder part came next, telling the congregation. I stood before them one Shabbat morning, heart pounding in my chest. I looked out at the faces I had taught for years. People who trusted me, who had grown under my leadership. And I knew my words would change everything. I need to speak to you, I said, not as your rabbi, but as a man who almost died and came back changed. I told them with as much honesty and humility as I could about my near-death experience. I described the light, the presence, the visions. And then I spoke the words I knew would divide the room. I met Jesus, and I now believe he is the Messiah our scriptures have pointed to all along. Gasp, silence. A few murmurs, some shook their heads, some wept, some stood up and walked out. But others stayed, their eyes locked on mine, not with anger, but with searching. One man in the back, a skeptic I had sparred with in study for years, had tears on his face. I didn't try to convince them. I didn't argue. I just told them the truth. I told them I still loved the Torah. That my Jewish identity hadn't died, it had expanded. That I hadn't left the covenant. I had seen its fulfillment. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But it was also the most honest. And in that honesty, something began to shift. Not quickly, not neatly, but genuinely. It was only the beginning. Life after that moment of truth didn't get easier. It got clearer. I no longer see the Torah and the Gospel as separate stories. They are one. The law I once saw as the path to righteousness, I now see as the map that pointed to the only one who could fulfill it. Every time I open the scriptures now, both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, I read with new eyes. Where I once saw commandments, I now see promises. Where I once saw shadows, I now see the substance, Messiah. My study hasn't stopped. If anything, it's become deeper. The words I memorized years ago now carry weight I never imagined. Isaiah 53 brings me to tears. Psalm 22 speaks with eerie precision. Even the rituals, Passover, Yom Kippur, the sacrifices in Leviticus, take on new life when seen through the lens of Jesus. He didn't cancel what came before. He completed it and he changed me. I began to speak out, first in small groups, then at interfaith events. I shared my story not to argue, but to invite. I didn't come to debate theology. I came to talk about a person I had met, a truth I could no longer deny. Some welcomed my message. They listen with open hearts, take notes, ask questions. Others are less kind. I've lost friendships. A few rabbis I once studied with won't return my calls. Some have called me confused or worse, a traitor. I get it. This message cost something. It cost me everything I thought I knew. But it gave me something far greater. Peace, clarity, purpose. It's not easy walking between two worlds. I still keep Shabbat, I still fast on Yom Kippur. I still read the Talmud. But I do it now with the awareness that the story didn't end in the Torah. It kept going right into the Gospels, right to the cross, and right out of the empty tomb. I've learned not to fight for acceptance. My mission isn't to be approved. It's to be honest. If a single person hears my story and begins to wonder if Jesus might be who he claimed to be, then the risk is worth it. My wife Miriam stands with me quietly, steadily. Our faith conversations are different now. We pray together in a way we never did before. It's not just about tradition anymore. It's about relationship. Our children ask hard questions. I welcome them. They don't need rehearsed answers. They need truth, the same truth that pulled me out of darkness and into light. To those who listen to my story and wrestle with it, I don't blame you. I did the same. For decades, I closed that door. And then in a moment I never saw coming, Jesus opened it. And what I found wasn't betrayal. It was the completion of everything I had ever believed. So I'll leave you with this. Psych truth, not comfort, not tradition, not consensus. Truth, it might cost you something. It might shake the ground beneath your feet. But I promise you, if you find the one I found, you'll never walk in darkness again.